Hey guys, Susie and Travis here from the Wolf HunterZ, and we have a reaction video for you. This link right here is where you can submit your reaction request, but not right here. It's this link only in the description box below. Today's video is brought to you guys by Don K, who's bringing us
PDQ Bach Speaks.
Don K says, "Hi Travis and Susie, I've sent you a bunch of PDQ Bach stuff since I found your channel back in March. I thought it would be interesting for you and your fans to learn a little more about the man behind it all, Peter Schickele. This interview excerpt from 1996 is quite insightful, and you get to hear him sing a hilarious song he wrote called Hunger. I hope you enjoy this peek behind the curtain. Kindest regards, Sir Dakota." And then there's a timestamp. All right. Did you know there was a timestamp?
Timestamp.
Did you know there was a timestamp?
I knew that.
Oh. Hit the like button and subscribe.
Hello and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. Fanfare for the Common Cold. Concerto for two pianos versus orchestra. Music for an awful lot of winds and percussion. These subversive-sounding titles could only be the work of classical music's most popular satirist, Peter Schickele, a prolific and versatile composer who is possessed from time to time by his best-known creation and alter ego, P.D.Q. Bach. Welcome to Upon Reflection. One of the things that you're often praised for is the fact that your parodies and satires in music allow people who don't know a great deal about classical music in. There are a lot of ways for people to play with what you do. And I wondered if there was some way you could illustrate how you hear a piece of music, think, this would be great for a satire, and you work with it to create something Schickele.
Well, I think that in the first place, what is perhaps worth saying is that when people say, do you do PDQ Bach in order to bring people into classical music, to me that's a wonderful side product. But I think that any entertainer is probably lying if he says that the reason he does something is for educational reasons. My mother says I've been entertaining people since I was 18 months old. And I told that to one of my friends, and she said, "What took you so long?" So I mean, I think basically the urge to entertain and to see the funny side of something is it's a basic one. And I've just always been, even though I've written a lot of serious music in addition to all the PDQ Bach stuff and everything, I do always have that tendency to see the funny side of something. One of the most serious pieces in the symphonic repertoire, for instance, in operatic repertoire, is the beginning of Wagner's opera Tristan and Isolde, which goes... And years ago, it occurred to me that you could do that as a tango. And so I sort of played that at parties, as one does. And never finished it and never thought about what it should be for or anything. And then a bassoonist.
I played that at parties, as one does. Like, everybody plays the piano at parties. Yeah. I really love his personality. Yeah. He just, that just
good, sincere
sweetness
honesty
that you feel from Bob Ross and from Fred Rogers. I feel that same vibe coming from him. Like, he's just a good man,
who was graduating from one of the conservatories in New York said, you want to write something for 4 bassoons for my graduation recital. So I thought, 4 bassoons, that's the perfect medium for, and then since Wagner created this sort of home base for his operas at Bayreuth and did his operas there, I called that Last Tango in Bayreuth, and for 4 bassoons, and it's probably one of my most often played and recorded compositions. Even though it's fairly esoteric if it isn't set up for you.
The titles of the works are one, Einstein on the Fritz is one of my particular favorites. Philip Glass, who is parodied in that work, is a longtime friend and colleague of yours. How did he take the
well,
treatment?
he one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize about Philip, because he doesn't show it in his interviews so much, is that he's got a terrific sense of humor. His interviews and articles tend to come across pretty heavy, but he's got a tremendous sense of humor. And as a matter of fact, when I was working on Einstein on the Fritz, I called up his apartment in September, and I got his lady friend and said I just wanted to invite the two of you to the annual PDQ Bach concerts in Carnegie Hall in December, because I'm going to be doing Einstein on the Fritz. And she said, well, he's out in San Francisco recording, but he's going to call tomorrow night at 7. So I'll have him call you tomorrow night at 7. So I said, okay, just tell him that I'm doing a takeoff on Einstein on the beach, doing a takeoff on his music, and I hope he can come. So 7 o'clock the next night, the phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Philip saying, "Et tu, Brute?" And so, he came and enjoyed it a lot. And as a matter of fact, it was a coincidence that we happened to be working with the same copyist at the time. He was having a piece copied by the same copyist I was working with. And he came up to her office once, and she was working on Einstein on the Fritz, and he picked up one of the flute parts and said, well, looks right. So, he got a big kick out of it.
He paid you a wonderful compliment once in a description of you where some people have a knack for spoken languages, and he said you had a tremendous ear. He said Peter could do synthetic Stravinsky. Peter could do synthetic Mozart. And it was just this gift you had for replicating this sound.
Well, it's interesting. To me, I mean, I can do that to a certain extent, but actually, to me, the secret ingredient of PDQ Bach is that it isn't exactly a replica of Bach or Mozart or whoever it's sending up at the time.
It's, for want of a better word, a little twisted.
Yes, right, and it actually has its own sort of language, and I think what you strive for in something like that is to make it worth listening to, fun to listen to more than once, even after you know what the gags are, and maybe that's something I learned from Spike Jones. When I was a kid, I was a tremendous Spike Jones fanatic and spent hours with my brother and friends acting the records out to each other and lip-syncing them.
In front of the Rotary Club.
In front of the Rotary.
You know what I love about him so much is how down-to-earth he is.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like
Be very modest.
he's also talking to us, like, on our level, where, he's a bit of a genius, you know what I mean? And yet, he's talking to us.
Being relatable.
Yeah, relatable. That's really good.
Yeah.
Rotary Club later on, right. And but one of the things that impressed me then and still impresses me now is what a good band Spike Jones had, the tremendous musicians. And I've met people who've talked to him, and I've met his daughter, Linda, and also people in theaters around the country where he's played. And I know that he loved to give the impression that they never rehearsed,
Just this sort of racket.
Yeah, right. One stage manager theater manager in Hershey, Pennsylvania, said that Spike Jones would come in and the manager would say, well, what do you want to do? And he would say, well, what do you want to do? And he would just, but behind the scenes, I happen to know he was a workaholic, and they rehearsed all the time. And of course, that's the trick, is to make it sound like it's off the cuff, but actually, like many writers who write beautifully fluid prose, but you find out then worked over every word.
With such an ear for the way other people create music, was it a struggle at all to sort of make your way through the musical thicket to what your own sound was, your own style?
Well, I sort of have always felt that that you do that in time. And I'm not saying I never thought about it or worried about it, but I've sometimes thought that this century has such a high priority on individuality that young composers, worry about it too much. In other words, I remember when I was a composition student at Juilliard, to tell somebody that his quartet sounded Shostakovich-y or something was terrible. Nobody wanted to hear that. And yet I think in the 18th century, you just wrote music. And if you had an individual personality, it came out as you matured. but you didn't worry about finding your own voice so much as early as possible, you know. So it's true that I have
I think that this is true because, you know, and I don't think that people should take offense to stuff like that, you know. I think that it's normal for people to find something in their schema to relate a new piece of art to. So when they listen to something, they might be like, oh, that sounds an awful lot like this. Or like, say somebody has a baby, right? They'd be like, wow, he looks just like his grandfather, his mother, his father, whatever. I think that it's normal for people when they hear your music to try to almost encourage you by telling you who they think that you sound like. And I do think that those things can be true because if you're inspired by these people, of course, that's going to be reflected in your art. It doesn't mean that you're copying them. It just means that they've inspired you and you like the sound, and there's only like so many sounds in the world. So I do think that, you know, you are a product of what you are inspired by. And then like he's saying, as you grow older and have more life experience and mature, you know, your life experience starts to come across in your art. And I think that that is a really cool thing when it happens.
Yeah. A chameleon-like quality there. And
I love him.
And even among in my serious music, it ranges from serious, really serious with a capital S, sad, whatever you want to. But also a lot of my serious pieces have real sort of fun places in them, and
you just can't stop yourself.
Well, you know, it's even more philosophical than that. I've always said, it's true, I can't stop myself, but it's always bothered me that people accept the idea of a novel or a play or a movie that is basically serious having comic scenes in it. But in music, they seem to say this is either a serious piece or a funny piece, period, yeah. Nothing in between, you know. And that's just not the way I think.
I'd love to hear you play.
I feel like how you even referenced that, I feel like in superhero movies, it started with, it was all serious, and then they started throwing a little bit of comedy, and then there became a lot of comedy mixed with action and all that
He's
stuff.
good for musicians. I feel like he's bringing a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
You know, in the way that he speaks.
Yeah. I like it too how, like, he's just like, I just do me. I do what I love. I have a good time.
He's like, who cares? But, like, I don't focus so hard on being me that I'm not being me. Yeah.
Play something that is less sort of what people most associate you with, the funny, ha-ha, something that is more serious, something that's another facet of your work.
Well, there are all sorts of facets of my work, and actually there's another whole facet that is perhaps the least known of what I do, which is modern, what you might call folk pop songs in the Randy Newman, Paul Simon tradition. There's a little serious piano piece I thought I'd play as we're going out at the end of the program, but maybe what I'll do now is sing one of those songs. Which,
speak for yourself.
Yes, right. And here again, the songs range from very serious to very funny, but here's one that somebody once wrote to me and said, can I please have the lyrics of this song? I'd like to put them up on my refrigerator. Got up this morning, couldn't fit in my jeans, and need to lose a lot of weight, and you know what that means. It means hunger. Hunger means hunger. All it takes is a couple of weeks on the road, and I come back looking like Mr. Toad because of hunger. Hunger because of hunger. Now I really hate being so gall-darn fat, but there's something else I may hate worse than that, and that's hunger. Hunger, and that's hunger. Still in all, you know, it doesn't make sense to be a dictionary picture of the adjective immense because of hunger. Hunger, because of hunger. And you can't believe all that you read in the press. If you want to lose weight, well, you gotta eat less. It means hunger. Hunger, it means hunger. So to most of the foods that I love, so I'm gonna say goodbye and I'll say hello to old hunger. Hunger, to old hunger. And every time I feel I can't be strong, I'll just write another verse to this dippy little song about hunger.
I catch you too.
About hunger. Bye bye love, bye bye happiness. Hello emptiness, feel like I could die.
I could just go on and on.
A little help from the Everly Brothers there at the end, right?
You did arranging for Buffy St. Marie and Joan Baez. You wrote for film, television, the soundtrack for Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are. All different kinds of things, and yet you work in an art form. Pardon me if you may think I'm wrong about this, but it seems to me that music, more than any art form, is obsessed with categorizing. Maybe it's because they have to figure out where to put the record in the record bins or something, but there seem to be more ways to split music apart than any other art form.
I mean, just imagine of where it was at that time to where it is
Yeah,
today, and how many times it has
It's been
split.
spliced a bajillion times since 1996, for sure.
Well, that may be true, and I mean, it is certainly something that annoys me, the whole record bin thing, and then also it's interesting that radio stations are very sensitive about their formats. I mean, I do a radio program of my own called Schickele Mix. Yeah, and part of the point of the program is to illustrate musical principles with all different kinds of music. And a lot of stations have trouble with it because they don't, if they're a classical station, they don't want somebody turning in the middle of the program and hearing Conway Twitty or the Beatles or something, you know, and it's interesting to me in that we live in a time when multicultural is one of the buzzwords, you know, and yet a lot of radio stations are extremely worried about putting on anything that doesn't fit into their format, which is another aspect of what you're saying. The whole categorizing thing I think is really annoying. The business of a composer working in a lot of different ways, I don't think is anything new, actually. If Mozart were writing now, I'm sure he'd be writing film scores. As a matter of fact, there's a movie of Don Giovanni that they took it's set around Venice. And the beginning of the opera in the movie is just fantastic because it starts with this sort of sword fight and the killing of somebody and everything. And when you see it in a movie, directed in a fluid way using all the camera motion and stuff of the movie, the music sounds like movie music. You know, here it was written 2 centuries ago, and yet it's terrific action movie music. And Mozart wrote for opera, he wrote for symphony, he wrote for chamber music, he wrote for parties, he wrote rounds, you know, for parties. He wrote, you know, if somebody came to him with this new instrument called the glass harmonica, which is basically running your finger around the rim of a wine glass to get tones, he'd write a piece for it, you know. And he wrote music for people to eat dinner to, and so I think that the kind of thing that I've done, and there are certainly other composers who have too, of writing in all these different, for all these different media, is not that new. It's just that there are more different media now.
How did we get it?
That is where our timestamp is, I think. Let me double check that. Yep. Don K, that was really educational. I loved getting to know him a little bit more of his personality, his way of thinking, his views on the industry, the world, music, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you've really brought us through a lot of very interesting classical music and just all kinds of stuff. And we greatly appreciate you. Guys, check out that link below in the description box to request your own personal reaction video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Stay tuned. Stay positive.
We love you guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.
I just wanna bang my